Ladies and gentlemen, the intellectual dark web is for baby boomers. Over the past year or so, a supposedly diverse group of internet-enabled thinkers has managed to make quite a name for itself. Many members of this group have their own strong, independent digital platforms, and some of them have been building these platforms for years. They go on each other's shows and collaborate. They pitch themselves as a group of brave truth-tellers waging an insurgent war against the politically correct establishment. They come from diverse places politically, but they are supposedly united in providing facts over feelings. The fact that their insurgent movement got a glowing review in the pages of the New York Times should begin to indicate that not all is exactly as it seems here. Now, I don't want to try to deny the very real accomplishments of some of these figures. Jordan Peterson apparently serves as a father figure for a lot of lost young men, and there's nothing wrong with self-reliance as a philosophy. I only know Sam Harris from his deeply historically ignorant coverage of Islam, but intelligent friends of mine assure me that his podcast has value outside of its bigotry. Joe Rogan is a charming guy, and the fact that he can get millions of people to watch 3-hour interviews is impressive. Honestly, I've never found anything Ben Shapiro or Dave Rubin has done to be anything other than irritating and kind of silly, but I'll confess that what I've heard hasn't convinced me to do the necessary research. Maybe they're great. So some of these folks do interesting, worthwhile stuff individually, but what has been puzzling me is the nature of their newfound notoriety. They're being celebrated as a new, insurgent, anti-establishment force in the culture, but they're being celebrated in places like the New York Times opinion page and Bill Maher's immortal HBO talk show. Less prominently, they've become darlings of the billionaire-supported media, from the hyper-establishment Atlantic to traditional right-wing donor money sinks like the National Review. I'd argue that this very wide appeal comes from a pretty simple source. Baby boomers. Our most selfish generation loves to seem transgressive. When they were young, they grew their hair long, flirted with Marxism, and delighted in telling their parents and grandparents how stupid they were. Now that they are old, they delight in telling their children and grandchildren how stupid they are. If the intellectual dark web has a signature issue, it's making fun of academia and the left-wing professors and students that can't handle the brave truths that the intellectual dark web is pushing. This is not a new issue. William F. Buckley, widely seen as the father of the modern U.S. conservative movement, first came to prominence with his academia-bashing book, God and Man at Yale. Bashing academia was one of Ronald Reagan's biggest issues as governor of California in the late 60s and early 70s. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing to this critique. Academic snowflakery is often worth pushing back against, and I'm not against that in all instances. But I think we have to acknowledge that there's a very well-established pool of influence and money that loves to support this kind of activism. Individual members of the intellectual dark web may very well have diverse opinions and support certain unorthodox views, but they only ever get celebrated and famous for issues that flatter old white men. Feminists, college students, and Muslims are the targets of their most famous arguments. Sam Harris gets invited on Bill Maher to rag on Muslims, not to talk about consciousness or whatever. And I've certainly never had anybody under the age of 60 send me any piece of Ben Shapiro media. Despite its reputation, the intellectual dark web never punches up. They only ever punch down at the sorts of people and causes that irritate the true sources of power and wealth in this country. This has been illustrated by their reaction to the most politically incorrect figure of 2019 so far, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Now, Omar did have a tweet from 2012 that is anti-Semitic by U.S. standards of political correctness that I agree with, but she has apologized for that. What she's done since coming to Washington is mount an unrelenting assault on our politically correct ways of talking about U.S. foreign policy. It's been extraordinarily brave, and she continues to pay a massive price. The courageous, insurgent, intellectual dark web is nowhere to be seen on this. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not right. Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin have been providing a masterclass in putting feelings over facts in their relentless attacks on Representative Omar. It turns out they have no problem with identity politics when they imagine it's their identity that is being threatened. The intellectual dark web is fundamentally about making baby boomer men feel sexy and transgressive one last time, without actually challenging anything about their worldview. You could argue that this entire video has been about jealousy, and you'd probably be right. Every figure I've discussed in this video is massively more successful than I am. They've found the special sauce for success in the arena of ideas that has eluded me for like 5 years now. But I think they've found that success by flattering power, not pursuing truth. In that, if absolutely nothing else, I like to think that I've been a bit more successful than the intellectual dark web. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And if you'd like to help me feel more successful, you can find my PayPal donation link in the description below and a link to my crowdfunding thing on Patreon right here. Thanks.